is just a huge honor for me today to have an implant legend come over to my house all the way from, he's on the other side of town, Chris Winterholler, DDS DICOI, Diplomate, International Congress Oral Implantology, LVIF, that's Las Vegas Institute Fellowship, FAGD, Fellowship of the Academy of General Dentistry. Chris Winterholler is a leading provider of dental implants in the Phoenix area who uses cutting-edge technology for all your dental needs. He is a Diplomate in the International Congress of Implantology, Fellowship in the Academy of General Dentistry and Las Vegas Institute. Dr. Chris is a graduate from Creighton University School of Dentistry. I went to Creighton in Omaha and undergrad. And Nobel Biocare Implant Residency. His office is the only one in the state of Arizona with on-site CT guided surgery, Procera CAD CAM design software and scanning, as well as surgical guide fabrication done while you wait with CEREC 4.0. Unlike corporate dental implant centers, Dr. Winterholler will follow up on your dental care for years to come. He is an internationally recognized expert in the latest dental technology with implants and CAD CAM dentistry, and I can tell you that every one of my friends who sinks more than 3 or 4 implants a week in the Phoenix area is your largest fan. And before we start, we both have a common friend, Dr. Brad Gettleman. So the number one book in implant dentistry was always Carl Misch's book. What do you have, like 6 editions? Mm-hmm. And the number one endo book around the world for decades. I even had this book in dental school, and my 30-year class reunion was last Friday night. Stephen Cohen's Pathways of the Pulp, and we had Stephen Cohen on a past podcast. But my buddy, and our buddy, Dr. Brad Gettleman, wrote Chapter 8, Non-Surgical Retreatment by Bradley H. Gettleman. And I have to say that in dental school, he was G, his last name Gettleman, I was Farran, so we sat near each other the whole school. And that boy was just a different breed of cat. If the instructor said we had to go buy a plastic tooth and do a crown prep, Brad'd by 30. When everybody got done, they'd go to lunch or they'd go to happy hour or whatever. He was just a machine.
He stayed at the school and kept doing it.
One of the most intense dudes I ever met, and he might have got that from wrestling. He's a wrestler too. So tell me, Chris, I'm going to start with this. They come out of school, and their number one complaint is, we didn't place one implant in school. So now here you're doing all that. And podcasters are young. Guys our age read textbooks. And by the way, the best way to learn how to do a root canal is read the damn textbook. Textbooks are the cheapest, fastest way. You spend more on a plane ticket flying to some one-day lecture. You could have bought the textbook. And could you have read that in 8 hours during your endo deal? I remember when I went to Carl Misch's. I got my fellowship in the Mission Institute, my Diplomate in the International Congress of Implantology. And I remember I got Misch's book. And I read it like twice before I took the first class. And I was amazed at like every single question. I'm like, okay, that was in chapter 1.
People ask the basic question
it's like
that they should have got from the textbook that they read before they got to the course.
It's like, why would you fly all the way to Pittsburgh for a 3-day weekend course that costs like $3,000 and you didn't even read the book? It's so much faster and cheaper.
Isn't there something said that you only absorb 15 to 20% of what you hear? So they're getting a 15 to 20%.
And the other thing I liked about Misch's book is his number one complaint about that book was what I loved about the most. So each chapter, there's so much repetition on earlier chapters. And just like you said, a lot of the stuff you need to hear it 5, 6, 7 times. So when he's explaining this concept in chapter 8, that might have 80% have been in earlier chapters, but
you've heard it already a couple times at that point.
But podcasters are young. I mean, you're probably talking to 20% dental students, and the other 79% is probably in their 20s and 30s.
First 10 years of practice, most likely.
Yeah, they just devour podcasts. So how does she go from I've never placed an implant to you, who's all that in a bag of chips?
Well, I think I was pretty lucky in that Creighton didn't train specialists in their program, still doesn't. They train just general dentists. So anything that walked into the clinic when we were juniors and senior dental students came to us. We got to do it. So if you picked up patients that needed implants, they had a special little clinic. They'd take you off into the implant inner sanctum, clear in the back, and let you place implants. But traditionally, you couldn't restore the implant because you could only place them in your senior year, and then you'd graduate and you couldn't restore because your patients got handed off to the student coming in. But I was lucky enough that I married a junior dental student and went back and dental assisted all the cases that I'd done. So I got to place about 30 implants and restore those same 30 implants before I even had graduated from dental school. Plus I got a brother and a brother-in-law. They're both oral and maxillofacial surgeons, about 13 other dentists in my family. So by the time I'd got out of dental school, I'd already seen a lot of dental work.
Are they all in the Phoenix area?
Mostly in Montana, Las Vegas, Wyoming, spread out all over the country.
So is there a recessive gene for dentistry like there is male pattern baldness?
Well, I don't know. I think my dad was a butcher. He was a meat cutter. So I don't know where the dentistry gene got caught up into it.
Well, all kidding aside, my mom's dad, my grandpa Mark, who was the short, fat, bald guy who gave me my hair, he was a butcher too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Meat cutter.
And I'll tell you how funny that was, because so my mom always got to grow up on steaks. And when she married my dad at 18, he had never had a steak. And I mean, he was poor in Parsons, Kansas. And he remembers his wedding night as one of the coolest things, eating this big old nice steak that his father-in-law gave him.
He remembers the steak from the wedding night.
Oh my gosh. And mom's like, was so bored of steaks. I mean, she'd eaten them her whole life. But isn't that amazing?
And then he turned out to be a meat cutter or a butcher?
My dad?
Yeah.
Well, no, he went into Sonic Drive-In franchise.
Oh, okay.
Which is where I learned my business.
Very
Because
cool.
franchises are, 90% of their training is how to run a franchise, not how to make a hamburger, fry, and a Coke.
Standard operating procedures.
Yeah,
methods,
and that's where I cut my teeth in business. I mean, when I watching my dad set up all these Sonics, when I came to Phoenix, I did my demographics first. I did my marketing plan. I was opening up a new Sonic Drive-In franchise,
Yeah.
and then I realized that all my classmates, if their mom and dad owned their own farm or restaurant or whatever, were crushing it. But if your dad was an employee and your mom stayed home, you were clueless. I mean, you could even make payroll the first week. You
That's
didn't even
right.
know how to use a pegboard system.
My dad was a butcher, but he had 15 different ways of making. We sold firecrackers to the Montanan people in the summer. We take 100-pound bags of cocoa and measured them out on his meat scale and sold them to the ladies in my mom's beauty shop. I can't tell you how many jobs my dad did to put us all through college.
Yeah, and today the millennials, they come out of school and they buy like an $80,000 BMW, and you're like, your dad worked 40 years and doesn't have a BMW.
No clue.
And
Yeah.
and then they it seems like their idea of working is just buying expensive stuff and debt and debt and debt. And then you and I come from this land where your dad made money taking cocoa to a hair salon. And I mean, my dad, I'll never forget one time he got so mad at me. I was 10 years old and I was making a hamburger and I put 4 pickles on there. And my dad picked up that hamburger and he threw it against the wall and he says, Howie, if you're going to put 4 pickles on it, you might as well just give it away for free. It's 3.
3
And I
pickles.
thought,
Yep.
damn, he just threw that hamburger. It was all about the easiest dollar earned is $1 in expenses saved.
That's right.
And these people, it's like if they don't go to a dental convention and buy a $50,000 piece of equipment, they don't even feel like they're a good doctor.
That's right.
And you tell someone, well, why don't you just take an $18 Emperor gum and send it to a lab and have them make a crown for $99? No, I think I'll get a $30,000 intraoral scanner and a $150,000 CAD cam and fly to Germany 3 times a year to learn how to use it. And I mean, it's just like every time they have an idea, their overhead goes up.
Well, but we are podcasting here, so we're not technology adverse. Is that correct?
It's true, but I think technology should make you solve the problem faster, easier, higher in quality, lower in cost for the customer.
Agreed. Well, back to the implant.
So how does she go from, come on, dude, I didn't place 1. Where would you tell her to start? And the reason I ask that, I know it's a mundane question, but in dentistry, so many of the implant courses are tied to the implant system. So a lot of times she's like, well, I took this course, but it was all like pro this implant or it's pro Biocare.
Based on the manufacturer-sponsored implant. That's right.
So when you have an industry where the people teaching you are selling you a system, she's smart being cynical. So where would you tell her to start? Is it true, first of all? Should she pick the system, then follow the training?
Well, I think it's bad necessarily to get involved with industry to teach you the basics of implants. But what I find if you go to kind of the advanced levels of implantology, what you really have to concentrate on is what kind of connection to the implant, to the restoration are you going to be doing. So nowadays, you know, when I first started placing implants, there was probably 40, 50 different companies you could buy implants from, and 40, 50 different connections, different screwdrivers. So nowadays you kind of try to say it's either going to be a conical type connection, it's going to be an internal hex type connection, it's going to be a Straumann type connection, or an Astra. There's only about 5 connections that exist.
Say all 5 of them.
Well, I'd say the best ones are...
Well, you said first was conical. What would that be, Bicon?
No, conical is Nobel Biocare, makes a conical connection.
Explain to him, if she's listening to this on iTunes, what that conical Nobel Biocare connection would look like.
Well, a conical connection has a hex, so it can index 6 different ways. But it also has somewhat of a Morse taper cut into the connection with a land area that's perfectly spherical or round. So when the implant and the abutment attach to each other, it seals. Remember when they used to come up with these crazy ideas of one-piece implant where the implant and the abutment were all in one piece? We tried those and they kind of worked, except you got to be absolutely perfect in your placement to get them restored, which nobody's perfect in placement. I don't care if we're even using guided. But the conical connection allows you to essentially make a one-piece implant when the stuff is joined together. And my observations over the last 22 years is the seal between the implant and the connection is really what's critical for long-term success. So kind of the implants that I've kind of vetted through, because I've done almost every single one of them. I've gone through all the industry training stuff. But I've settled out to anything that has a conical or a platform switched connection. So I'll cite Nobel Biocare makes a great implant. A lot of companies knock off their connection. They're equally as good. Dentsply has Ankylos, which is a great implant, which is a conical connection. The one that I'm presently using right now that I really, really like, because all of their implants have one connection. So your inventory is significantly reduced for how many parts you have to keep in stock. And they've got a really perfect conical connection. And you bury the implant underneath the bone, so the bone grows up over the top of it. You get a mucosal seal that way. But the implant I'm talking about is a Neos, or not a Neos, a Neodent.
Neodent out of Brazil.
Neodent out of Brazil.
Which was just bought by Straumann a year or two ago.
Straumann owns them 100%. I was initially skeptical that, you know, a Brazilian company, what do they know about dental implants? Well, it turns out that I think there's 200 and some million people in Brazil, and they've got almost double the amount of dentists there than we do here. It's a very progressive.
There's another thing that no one talks about in Brazil.
Huge implant market in Brazil, and very progressive thoughts. And
the largest lecture I ever gave in my life was in São Paulo. 4,000 dentists.
Yeah.
4,000. But here's something that no one likes to talk about in Brazil, because you said you didn't think Brazil would make an implant.
Well, I didn't know how to present it to a patient like I'm putting Brazilian implants in.
Well, you know what it is. You know what it is. This is an ugly past history or whatever. But when the Germans and the Japanese knew they were losing the war, all those manufacturing guys making all those tanks and jeeps,
they went to Brazil.
They were going to get their heads chopped off. So the last year of the war, they were taking all their money and gold and technology. So when you go to São Paulo, you think you're in Brazil, and then all of a sudden you hit this German district where you think you're in Berlin, and that's where they make cars and motorcycles and all this stuff. And then
they've got Volkswagen factories down there.
Yeah, right. and then you leave that section, and then you think you're in Japan. I mean, I've been in Tokyo, I've been in São Paulo. It's the same thing. And Japan makes jets. They make airplanes. I mean, Japan is basically German, Japanese engineering.
Well, I think by sheer volume of how many implants they place in Brazil and Latin America, because it's much more prevalent down there. And it's a smaller company, so they can adapt and they can innovate much faster than a great big company. And then when I saw Straumann buy Neodent out, I was convinced that.
Well, that's why Straumann.
That's a great implant.
That's why Straumann gave Nobel Biocare a run for its money and probably passed them, because when Nobel Biocare, they'd get a design, they'd talk about it for half a year, then they go out to these schools and it'd take them a year to set up the study, then they do the study for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Whereas Straumann, the guy that started that, Dr. Park, had a 10-story dental office, and they'd design it on a napkin, have 1,000 of them made
That's
by
right.
the next day.
That's right.
And then his own 100 dentists placed them all, and so he shortened the research cycle time from 5 years to less than a year.
And I'll tell you who's doing that at even a swifter rate is the Israelis. They are making innovations in implants beyond anybody in the world.
Are you talking
right
about
now.
MDI? Is it?
Well,
MDI?
there's MIS.
MIS. I'm sorry.
There's Paltop. There's High Tech. There's dozens of Edison of implant companies in Israel that innovate at a rate that is unheard of in the United States.
Well, Straumann bought MIS too.
No, Serona. Dentsply just bought MIS.
Then was it MDI?
Not MDI is the mini implant,
Yeah.
the one in Oklahoma, I think.
No, I thought anyway. Huh.
But
I know Straumann bought something in Israel.
here's the thing that I think the best advice to give somebody coming out that's trying to get into implantology is you can learn it from industry, but we're kind of in a watershed moment of technological and communication right now, where you've got these internet forums like Dentaltown. There's one that's the Blue Sky Bio Academy. Those guys are doing some absolutely incredible stuff, disseminating information on how to do implants. You can learn most of this online, or, don't laugh, but somebody asked me one time, how'd you learn how to do an all-on-4? And I had to bite my tongue and say I learned it on YouTube.
I know. We had a talk about low cost. We had a dentist here the other day, and he learned how to do all of his implants just by searching YouTube.
There's so much information out there. I mean, a guy like me with ADHD, I'm up all night watching YouTube videos on wiring my house or learning how to do dental implants or those sorts of things.
You can't make this up. I had a patient.
It's crazy what's going on right now.
I had a patient that repairs jets for the Navy. That's his job. Fighter jet engines. And he says the Navy manuals are just crazy,
arcane.
Insane,
Can't understand them.
And every time they get stuck, they YouTube the exact question, and some other Air Force guy stationed around the world did a YouTube video on how to pull this pin out and do this. But
it's a great time to be alive as a dentist. I think there's never been a better time to be able to help people that are. I think the biggest demographic that's untouched in dentistry right now is the terminally dentate. The people that are just about to lose their teeth. And I can see this in my own history because back in 1995 when I got out of school, the hottest thing then, oddly enough when you bring up pathways to pulp, was Cliff Ruddle and Steve Buchanan were teaching this rotary endodontic stuff. That I got out of.
They were partners back then.
Yeah, I got out of dental school and I got on a plane to San Francisco and I went and watched these guys use these rotary hand endodontic files that you could use one file to do a root canal. And that was just so unheard of because we used 20 files at Creighton to do a root canal and 4 4-hour appointments. So 16 hours to do a root canal, where now you could do them in 20 minutes. And now it's improved in 5th generation of those now. Well, my point of this is that we did a lot of root canals back then as general dentists learning how to do these cases, and we saved a lot of teeth that probably were a little bit of herodontics. And then we did a full mouth rehab 5 years later, and then we did an LVI rehab on this patient. Well, if you did a LVI full mouth rehab on somebody in 2005 that had six root canals done, guess where they're at right now? They need an all-on-4. So I see these patients that I have seen for 22 years, and I've done all their work, and I'm redoing their mouth for the 3rd time, but I'm doing it with implants at this point. So I feel like I just fell into like the cradle of the whole.
And that's something these kids don't understand. Like, they'll go to a veneer course and they'll think, this is awesome, man. I'll give her a movie star smile makeover. Yeah, you're 25. When you take a patient who's 25 and
don't cut the teeth
veneers,
when they're that young.
What do they look like 10 years later, 20 years later? What do they look like? What do those all 10 veneers do?
Well, those 10 veneers need to be replaced every 10 years. I don't care if the best guy on the planet and the best lab tech makes them. Patients are going to go chew Wrigley spearmint gum. They're going to drink Red Bull.
And those 10 veneers, when they're replaced, how many of those will turn into crowns?
They're going to all turn into crowns when they go from veneer to crown.
And how many of those crowns will turn into endo and crowns?
20 to 30% of those crowns will turn into endo almost right away.
I know. And it's so bizarre because when a dentist's daughter says, I want veneers, he says, no, you're going to have braces and bleaching.
My 21-year-old that's got perfect teeth is begging me to do veneers on her now just because her friend's got some. And I'd say, no way, I'm not touching your teeth because I want you to have your teeth when you're an old lady.
I'll never forget, I asked this in dental school. I met this 92-year-old dentist, and we were having breakfast, and somebody said, which teeth last the longest? And they were talking about the molars, incisors, whatever, and he goes, the teeth that last the longest are the ones that a dentist never touched.
The ones you leave alone. That's
he
right.
says, if you want it to last forever, don't touch it.
That's right.
And I thought that is so profound.
Well, my whole practice right now, by kind of intention and is kind of focused in, I've somewhat, I wouldn't say limited myself yet because I haven't abandoned my general dentistry practice, but I focus in on those people, and it's a real interesting demographic. And there's some corporate people that have emphasized in on this, like the Clear Choices and the Eons and the Chrysalis Implant Centers. I follow those guys.
Are they all in Phoenix?
Clear Choice is here in Phoenix, but Chrysalis is in Canada. Eon.
What are you saying, Chrysalis?
Chrysalis.
How do you spell that?
It's the CHRYSALIS. I think it's the equivalent of Clear Choice in Canada.
Okay. Is it owned by Clear Choice?
I don't think so.
And then what was the third one?
Like Eon Dental Clinics, that's in Chicago. But what I find is that people, and Howard, you know this because I think you still practice a little bit, but people will hang on to the most ridiculous, awful dentistry as long as they possibly can until they're just limping in with Scotch tape and baling twine on their teeth before they'll go to dentures. People do not want dentures. So when you've got all this jerry-rigged or, cobbled together, and I don't say that in a bad way because people tried to keep their teeth for them, but that demographic of people that are deathly afraid of losing their teeth, when they have an idea that they can come in and just in a day get everything taken out under sedation and get implants placed and with immediate loading and the new implant designs. And this stuff's been proven for 25 or 30 years now. Get a brand new set of teeth that very same day and walk out and eat a meal that night and go on back to work on Monday. That's a very powerful thing.
That's what you're talking about, you're all on 4?
Yeah, all on 4 or all on 6 or all on 3.
So let's go back. So
it's just crazy what's happening in the world right now.
We started with there's 5 shapes, and you said no Biocare, Dentsply, Ankylose, Neodent, MIS, make a nice conical, a Morse taper to a 6-sided hex. What were the other 5 shapes? There are 5 shapes, you said.
Well, the implants that I think are the most versatile, probably the best implant, the most universal use, everybody makes parts for them, is anything that has what's called an internal hex connection. One of my heroes in dentistry, I'd love if you could get this guy to do a podcast because this would be the one that I'd want to hear would be Jerry Nisnik.
I already had him.
Did you have it?
I had him 3 or 4 months ago, and it took me 2 years to get him. He's the busiest man on earth.
But talk about a great guy. I mean, he's somebody I want to I want to read his autobiography for making the connection and selling the implant to
and he's more energetic and hyper now than he was when I met him.
But if Jerry gets to hear me, hopefully I appreciate his contributions to dentistry as much as the meshes or the Branamark or those.
That was the funniest thing he said during the interview. Whenever I mentioned anything Mish said, he says, well, Carl spreads a lot of Mish information.
Yeah. He uses a lot of plays on words.
Oh, my God.
But anyway, internal connection because, and that's traditionally known as a Zimmer, Implant Direct. A lot of the Israeli implants right now use an internal hex connection. You can buy parts for internal hex from 20 different companies, and they'll all work and be cross-compatible with each other. So when you put an internal hex implant into somebody, and here's what's crazy, internal hex really isn't that popular in the Phoenix market, but it's a very versatile implant. And that implant followed by probably the Nobel Biocare conical connection, which is made by Implant Direct, makes that connection now. Blue Sky Bio makes that connection. Jack Hahn, another pioneer in implant dentistry who I greatly admire.
Where is he from?
He's from Cincinnati.
But now he's with Glidewell, right?
Well, now I could be wrong. This is just me taking information, piecing it together in my own mind. But he has Glidewell make his new design of an implant, which is more like an active, so it's a really aggressive thread implant. But it has a conical connection, and it's called the Hahn implant. But he's the guy that invented the trilobe, which is from Nobel Biocare. And I don't use those much anymore, and I think those have kind of fell by the wayside. They're easy to get parts for, but they're something that I don't think is a very good implant to put in anymore. But the Hahn has a conical connection, Blue Sky Bio, Implant Direct, and Nobel's the originator of it. The third connection is probably the Straumann tissue level. That's the one that looks kind of like a trumpet. And the implant abutment is generally an internal piece, so the margin for the crown on a Straumann tissue level abutment actually is on the implant itself. So instead of having two different interfaces, one interface at the implant that has a gap and then one at the crown to the abutment that has a gap, Straumann figured out a way to make one gap. But they're kind of persnickety to place, and they require very serious depth control to place a Straumann bullnose type implant, so those have kind of fell by the wayside. So I think most everybody now is using a fairly aggressive thread, immediately load type implant, like a Nobel Biocare Active.
I think the last time I heard the word persnickety was actually my grandma Mary before she died about 20 years ago.
Okay,
that is a
well,
word from the past.
Well, I'm going to come up with a couple more of them.
Is that a Iowa? Is that a? Because she was from small town in Kansas. Is that a small town?
No, it's Wyoming.
Montana word?
It's Wyoming. Yeah,
It's Wyoming. So what was the fourth?
So the fourth one I would say is like Astra, which has its own unique connection, and I'm just vaguely familiar with that. I know it was a big implant amongst the periodontists because it had some fine threads at the top which helped with the tissue attachment, but it hasn't really caught on as of late. And then I think the one that's really kind of the best implant connection right now is the one that I'm using that comes either from Ankylose or Neodent, which is the same connection. So
Isn't Neodent significantly cheaper than...
Neodent comes in at a price point that's a third what the Straumanns, the Nobel Biocares,
So is that what you're
the
using
Astras
mostly?
are. I use all Neodent now.
So you use all Neodent. What are you paying per implant?
I pay about $160 a unit.
$106 a unit?
Uh-huh.
And which Neodent implant particularly?
I like the Drive CM, which is what's called a cone morse. That's the connection that it's made of. They've got two different implant lines, which I think also makes the Neodent somewhat of a compelling implant. Their standard surface blast, titanium loving or bone loving titanium surface. But they also, since Straumann owns them now, they'll package for another $30-40 the implant in a wet SLA aqua surface. So the titanium never comes in contact with air because that's when it oxidizes. And those implants from Neodent with that SLA coating surface that they refer to as aqua, you can load in 6 weeks. So they're an immediate load implant that is...
Now, where do you buy those? You buy them from the Neodent website?
From Neodent. Well, the Neodent's got reps, or you can go to, I think it's called Instradent, because there's a number of different brands that Instradent sells. Neodent is one of them. Medentica is one of the brands that they sell, and Neodent also. But I keep those Neodent guys. If somebody else comes out with something better, I'll switch to them. So I'm always looking for the, what's better, what's more value.
Have you been down there to
what's
see the
more,
plant?
They invited me, but I've been through implant CAD CAM machines before.
Yeah.
It doesn't entertain
really
me
sexy.
anymore. Well, I fly across the world just to see a machine I can.
Yeah, that's 9. You got to fly to Atlanta, and then that's
show me a
4
YouTube
hours.
video of it. That'd
It's
be great.
4 hours to Atlanta, and then it's a layover, then 9 hours to Rio or San Paulo.
Someday when I'm not so busy, but that's a great implant, the Neodent. And what I like about the Neodent or the Ankylose is they're cross-compatible parts, and they essentially become a cold-welded one-piece implant once you put the abutment on them.
So, I'm tying you down to specifics. So, do you agree or disagree that in the United States of America, the implant training and the implant manufacturer is very interimmersed, so you almost have to pick an implant before you start the training. I mean, how many places have you gone and seen training where they talk about 3 or 4 different systems versus just a course that's really hammering?
Well, a year or two ago, I'd say that's true, but with all these internet forums that are popping up and the stuff on Dentaltown, I mean, how many hits does Implant du jour have on, or CEREC du jour have? There's hundreds of thousands of views in that one thing.
That one thread on Dentaltown?
Yeah, but there's implant forums that have thousands of hits on them also.
Yeah, but they're millennials. They don't want to get on Dentaltown. They'd rather fly across the country in first class, stay at a resort, and spend $3,000 a weekend.
They got to get it out of their system. They got a lot of pent up, spending frustration when they come out of dental school. So once they get past that.
So you'd pick the Neodent first.
Neodent's my favorite.
And then does Neodent have their own training? I mean, would they have the courses? Where would, or you just recommend Dentaltown, YouTube, Internet?
Well, that's hard for me to say. I mean, I went through a Nobel Biocare residency in 1998 that was very good. I joined the ICOI and took the time to become accredited. I really enjoy going to the ICOI because what I learned and gleaned from everybody that lectures there, they all use different implant brands, different connections and stuff. And the work's all good that they show. So what I kind of discovered from the ICOI is that titanium works. There's not one brand that's any better than the others. There might be one brand that's better in your hands or better for what you're doing. And I think the best all-around implant is, of course, that Neodent or an ankylose from Dentsply or an internal hex. I mean, you just have to, find an implant continuum of some sorts. There's some independent places popping up.
Any of them you like or recommend?
I've done a couple of them in my office, but I never really get too involved more than a couple days. Usually I want somebody to have a little bit of implant experience before I come in and teach them the basics. But I like...
So you mean you're doing this? You're teaching people in-house?
I've done it 4 or 5 times in the past in my office, but I'm a better wet-fingered dentistry than I'm a better wet-fingered dentist than I am some sort of a instructor or teacher. I've seen guys just lose their shirt when they become a center or an educator or build a training center.
What do you mean lose their shirt? I mean their money?
Well, like in the old CEREC days, I've seen guys build training centers and put hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars worth of equipment in it and wait a year and the technology get a software update that totally negated everything that they were teaching.
Right.
It just wiped it out. So I just think the best way to learn it's probably to go one of these little implant continuums.
Just in our town, no names mentioned, there's 10 guys who built
huge centers,
a huge center of education, and probably recuperated about 1% of their total dollars from their investment.
So it's hard to find a dental educator that'll be around a long time later.
Funny about that is one of the biggest secrets is any of the suppliers, Patterson, Shine, Benco, Burkhardt, you can go to any town and they'll let you use their in-house room. I mean, there's so much capacity of in-house training, and they always give it away for free because they want local dentists coming to visit.
They want to congregate there. They want them walking through the showroom.
They love it.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the CBCT. Your periodontist and oral surgeon are trying to send you cookies and cakes and anything. And if you ever call them up and say, you know what, I really don't want to buy a $150,000 CBCT. Can I send my patients to you? And you take the CBCT, you bill the insurance, whatever. What percent of the periodontists or oral surgeons say, hell yeah?
Most of them, I would think.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of oral surgeons here in town that don't even have CBCTs yet. Most of the general dentists that are into implants are the ones that buy them first. And I think the whole shift has happened where if you get involved in imaging, which I kind of wanted to talk about with you also, the CBCT and the merging of the DICOM files with the STL files and the CAD-CAM files that's happening right now is going to totally change our profession here in the next 5 years if it hasn't done already.
Okay, well, with that lead, you got to explain yourself.
It's just,
go back slower
and
explain what you mean by that, because that is a huge...
Well, 5 years ago, we all collected continuing education credit, listening to somebody tell us that if you go buy a cone beam, you better send every single one of those scans off to be read by an oral radiologist, because you're not going to diagnose something and you're going to get sued for it. Do you remember when people told you that?
Yeah, but see, I'm so old. I remember the same argument with a pano.
Well, that's all I'm saying is
that was the same argument with the pano. Now I got to live so long. Now I hear the same argument with the CBCT. So I'll call bullshit.
Well,
I've been to that rodeo twice.
I just think that the CBCT. I've been in the CEREC since I was since 1999, and I kind of ran it until I couldn't stand it anymore, and I go through these sine waves of love-hate relationship with CAD/CAM, particularly chairside CAD/CAM. I'm not a chairside guy anymore, where I used to think that was the only way to go.
And why did you love it then, and why did you end up hating it?
Because it limits your practice significantly. I've always said, and I kind of generated some heat from it, that I was one of 200 guys that got a CEREC machine when it was CEREC 2. I think you and I started talking way back when.
I know, but I one-upped you. What year did you get out of Creighton?
I got my CEREC in 1999. I got Creighton in 95.
You got out in 95. I got in 87. I had the CEREC 1.
Oh
my God.
That ruined you.
It was worse than a temporary.
But Werner Mormon, what a great idea, and look where it is now. All the labs are using CAD/CAM. If CEREC hadn't started where it was, it wouldn't be there. But my whole point with the CEREC is that it's great for a guy that has a practice that's somewhere between, if they're looking to get from $600,000 a year in production and wanting to bump it up, get a CEREC. But if you're already hitting $1.3 million, $1.5 million, don't get a CEREC, because that's as much as you're ever going to do.
You think it's a gas pedal from $750,000 to $1.2 million.
That's right.
But at $1.25 million, it's a brake pedal.
It's a brake pedal because you can't rotate. Remember your dental MBA when you said, how are you going to increase your capacity? Add more chairs. The problem is with CEREC, it still takes an hour and a half to do. I don't care how fast you are.
But when they say an hour and a half, when you're in the field, how long is that appointment in most offices that you visit?
Well, everybody's different.
But what would you say the average chairside?
I have a hard time saying because I'm the only.
Yeah.
I've been.
It's
like
3 hours.
You started Dentaltown.
It's 3 hours.
Yeah.
The dentist is like, yeah, we do an hour and a half. The dentist is like, no, doc, we see them at 1 and they were there till 4.
Well, I've done literally thousands of CERECs in my career, so asking me is the wrong question. Ask a guy that's new at it. Ask my wife. She can't stand it.
And why can't your wife send it?
She just doesn't like messing with stuff and, take an impression, put it in the box, send it to the lab. I'm a tinkerer. I like to send it. I like to push buttons and that sort of thing. But what I've discovered, and I can show you with numbers, that exact thing. If you need a bump from 600 up, great. But once you get to 1.2, figure out a better way. And I got a better way. I have to do another podcast on that.
No, let's do it. Talk. Go.
Well, I just figured out that my chair time was the most valuable thing. I love digital imaging, so I still use my CERECs for most of my stuff. I'll cut the prep and do an Omer Reed 90-second crown prep on something and going to take my camera and image it. I don't go with Omnicams. I still got the old blue cams. They work great. I don't mind powdering. But I'll use that Cerona Connect. And then what I did is I went and started my own laboratory entity where I bought one of the lab machines from Cerona that talks with the machine. So essentially what it does is, and I have a full-time technician in my office now, so
you bought a lab CAD
I bought the lab CEREC machine.
And what is that called?
It's called an InLab, MCX5.
InLab?
MCX5.
MCX5, and how much did that cost you?
It was actually less than buying a CEREC. Explain that to me, Cerona, why you charge...
Because the laboratory businesses are better businessmen?
$40,000 less for the one that makes 40 crowns at once versus 40,000 more for one that does one at a time. And rate limits you. So I bought the one that's the lab, and we just...
So, so how much was it then?
I think I paid $93,000 for the InLab, and that included the scanner and the milling machine and the sintering oven. So essentially, we just stack up cases all day long, and I might prep, 6 crowns a day. Sometimes I'll do 15 or 20 crowns in a day, and I'll image them and send them to the machine, and we download them at the end of the day about 3 o'clock.
So then you temporize and send the patient
We temporize them and send them home.
Yeah.
Don't want to tie up the chair time. And we'll nest all of those designs after they're made in the CEREC software, in-lab software, in a zirconia puck that's pre-shaded. So it's A1, A2, bleach, shade, whatever. And we'll mill 30 or 40 crowns out at once. And after they're milled, it takes 2 or 3 hours to mill them. We drop them into the sintering oven, and then the next day, we can make 30 or 40 crowns a night with that machine. And our cost of production is, I don't want to tick off any lab guys, but our cost of production with that's about $15 a crown.
$15 a crown, including the labor of the lab man?
He's making all my dentures, so I kind of get the crown and bridge as a bonus because it's just kind of a goofing around with it.
And how's he making the dentures? Is he doing that CAD cam or old fashioned?
We're starting to mill out our dentures with the CAD cam machine out of a solid puck of PMMA. So it's like, I can't even describe right now. I mean, I've been into dental technology ever since my career started in '95. But right now, it's difficult for me to keep up with all the innovations. The IDS this year had so many things come out. I'm still just in an absorption mode, particularly like for 3D printing and merging of DICOM files and STLs and merging of information that is going to make our job so much easier once the technology comes out.
I repeat myself a lot when I see the opposite happening in the industry. It's like, in 1900, there were no specialties, and healthcare was 1%. By 2000, there were 58 specialties in medicine, 9 in dentistry, and healthcare was 14% GDP. Now it's 2017, healthcare is 17% GDP. I keep seeing these dentists say, oh, I want to learn implants, I want to learn Invisalign, I'm going to learn sleep apnea, I'm going to be a cosmetic dentist. And I mean, I keep saying, you really think the business model is going back to 1900 where you're just going to be a master of everything?
No, I don't.
I often tell these kids, if you're going to, I mean, you're overwhelmed being caught up on one area. How can you be a master of everything?
Well, I'm an odd duck because I'll hold on to something until I get it. Like with CEREC, I just wouldn't give up until I could master it. And I've got full mouth reconstruction cases done with CEREC that were done when CEREC 3D was in beta. So there was only 8 people in the country that had it. But I knew I could do it, and we pulled it off, and the lady still comes in and sees me for recall. That's not the average. But what I do think is I've always kind of wondered, why do we need 8 specialties in the space the size of a softball? It kind of insults our profession, to be honest with you.
9 specialties.
9, yeah.
The ADA recognizes 9, and now the Texas Supreme Court said there's none. They said that's
there's none.
Well,
everybody can advertise whatever they want.
Well, remember the implantologists in Texas that went to court and they said, look, the ADA is a nonprofit membership club, that they're not a government ruling agency. And the Texas State Dental Association, a tripart of the ADA, tried to stop this guy from advertising he was a specialist, an implantologist. The court said, he is. That's all he does. And you're a membership club. If you want to kick him out of your club, whatever, and but it's not a regulatory. So now there's actually really legally no specialties.
My whole thing, and this probably came from my exposure in a town of 2,500 people where my uncle was the dentist and my other uncle, his brother, was the physician. And the physician would deliver babies. He'd fix hernias. He'd do everything except bypass operations in this little 2,500 people.
In Montana?
In Wyoming.
In Wyoming. What was the name of that city?
A little town called Lovell. It's 2,500 people still.
Lovell.
One stoplight. But my uncle, the same. There's no specialists in Wyoming. I think there's one oral surgeon and maybe one periodontist in the whole state. And then if you go to Montana, they've got oral surgeons and maybe one endodontist and maybe one periodontist. But here you're in a landmass that's the size of, most foreign countries, average size foreign countries, and it's all general dentists. And Creighton trained people to serve those areas. So my uncle, the dentist, would be doing immediate dentures because people couldn't travel 500 miles to Denver or Salt Lake City to get that kind of work done from a specialist. So I took that on from Creighton, and I believe that it's well within somebody's wheelhouse to perfect your skill in implantology.
Now you're going to have to explain to a millennial what a well house is.
Wheelhouse. Well, I don't know. I don't know how to describe some of my terms, I guess, but it's just a vernacular, I guess, I'm familiar with.
Yeah. So you said we're about the dawn of these massive changes in technology.
I marvel when I go to these dental meetings and these like IDS that the engineers are so much smarter than us at figuring all these things out. Even like with the CEREC, there's stuff in there that's embedded in there most dentists haven't even figured out yet.
What do you think about the debates about a closed system like Apple or Sirona versus an open system like ED for Plan Mechas or
Well,
Google or
it
Microsoft?
all goes back to that question right there. This might be the money shot for this whole podcast, is that having had CEREC for 18 years now, every version of it ever since, it's a rate limiter once you hit a certain level of production. And because a closed system will limit you at a certain level of production because the machines have to talk to each other. Where if you go with an open system, which essentially what I've done is I've opened my system up, you can start building some headroom from there. A traditional chairside CEREC machine only mills crowns and veneers and maybe a bridge if you're lucky. But I needed something that mills a denture, that mills a zirconia framework, that mills a metal framework for a bar or something like that. So when you talk open systems, and if you want a lot of headroom to be able to build anything that you're going to need in dentistry, you need a completely open system and not a CEREC.
Which is the same argument in dental practice management software. You go on Dentaltown, Open Dental, every thread on Open Dental is raving fans because the system's all open.
All open.
And then every forum on Dentrix from Henry Schein or Patterson's EagleSoft is a bitching, moaning, complaining. And Open Dental started just because one pissed off dentist in Oregon, Jordan Sparks, was trying to export his own patient's data for a mailing campaign. And then when he realized not only could he not export that data for labels, he finally realized they actually purposely paid programmers to make it so it happened.
Well, and
he was so pissed off he started Open Dental.
And I think that happens a lot in our industry, and it probably happens for a reason. There's one article I can think of that I read in Dentaltown. You were talking to the guy that originated SUNY X-rays,
Mm-hmm.
and the thing that hit me with that X-ray or with that article is he said that dentists don't realize that 80% of the price of the stuff that they buy is in trying to get them to buy it, the marketing aspects of it. The technology doesn't cost as much to develop as much as it is the marketing aspects of it.
I'll tell you the other embarrassing thing about owning it.
But the companies actually, to protect their turf, I won't mention any companies, but I think they actually take open files and they write little things on the end of the file to make them so that they're closed so that we can't get to them. Does that make sense? And then they charge you $5,000 or $10,000 for a dongle to strip off the little, middle finger in the file size that says you can't open it up.
Yeah, and what's funny is the planet Earth, the entire rock, is down to one factory in Japan that makes VCRs. So you see all these people advertising, my VCR is better than yours. Like, dude, they're all...
It's Matsushita.
And when you look at an X-ray sensor, to build a plant that makes an X-ray sensor is like $1 billion. And you go to these conventions, these guys saying, "Oh, mine's better than theirs. Theirs better." It's like, dude, you three, you all have the same sensor. I mean, do you really think these companies that you've never even heard of before, you can't name the CEOs, really has $1 billion factory making X-ray sensors?
Well, we know that because 10 years ago, if you and I went down to Best Buy and we'd say, "Okay, Howard, we're going to buy you a new TV for your front room," what TV would you have bought 10 years ago? What name?
Sony.
Okay, so 10 years later, you remember about 5 years ago, or it was probably right around then, I read this news article in the Wall Street Journal that said they're building this massive $1 billion TV flat screen panel manufacturing plant in Korea.
LG.
And it was LG. And, a flat screen TV back then was $10,000, and you thought, why are they spending that much money? Well, now we know, because nobody would buy, I wouldn't buy a Sony anymore. I wouldn't buy a Panasonic. I'd buy either a Samsung or an LG, because they're the best TVs. But they had a 10-year vision way back to build the infrastructure for those types of things.
Asia's always had a better government free enterprise relationship. We've lost 50 million manufacturing jobs since 1980, and they all went to Japan, Korea, China, because in those countries the government and free enterprise work together. In our country, it's just totally
Well, even the Chinese right now have a better capitalistic system than we do because it's an autocratic authority and they can say, no, we're going to do this and we're going to make rare earths and we're going to ship them everywhere in the world.
And I've let
in
you
the
know
U.S., they can't decide to legislate if they're going to mine rare earths here.
Their 5,000 Communist Party, they're all engineers.
Yep.
And then you come to our 500 congressmen, they're all lawyers who just want to fight.
Yeah. All right. We can't go into politics.
And they haven't built a nuclear reactor or an airport, a new airport or new nuclear reactor in 30 years.
Fly from
China's
Zurich.
built 30.
Fly from Zurich back into Newark and tell me what's wrong with the United States right now as far as what we have available to us. The infrastructure's got to be completely rebuilt. But anyway, we deviated.
Yeah.
Ask me a dental question because I think we're running out of time.
No, we're not running out of time because I'm going to chain you to the chair and keep. So back. What are you doing now in your practice? Are you mostly excited about implants? Are there any other areas that you're doing?
Mostly implants right now. We've kind of, I wouldn't say isolated or limited, but I'm looking for that patient that is in desperate need of some sort of a fixed type restoration, get out of the potential of dentures. And right now we do between 10 and 15. A good month we might do 20 cases of all-on-4 a month.
You're doing 20 all-on-4s a month. I mean, that's
a good month. Most of the month it's 10 or 15.
And what would you say the average clear choice is a month?
I don't know, but I know the Phoenix one does very well, and I always say keep doing what they're doing because it's creating awareness for a lot of people. One office can't possibly serve the needs of 6.5 million people in the state of Arizona, so there's plenty to spread around, but we just look for those people that want somebody that's more of a private practitioner that's going to be around for the next 20 years. All my hygienists are trained to be able to maintain an all-on-4. I think that's a selling point for us where patient comes in, they need this done. We're a little bit cheaper because I'm not paying $100,000 a month for advertising like what the Clear Choice guys are.
So what are you charging an arch?
We're about 20 an arch.
20 an arch, what's Clear Center?
They used to be 27.5, now they're down 22, 23. But I'm much more flexible. I mean, if I can look at it and it's an easy case, and
so let's throw the all-on-4 under a bus with the old saying, an all-on-4 is really none on 3, which means if you do all-on-4 and one implant fails, you lost the whole case. What do you say to that argument?
Well, there's two arguments to that. I've got probably 20 or 30 of the maybe, I'm estimating somewhere between 1,300 and 1,500 arches of all-on-4 I've done in the last 10 years.
1,300?
Yeah.
Holy moly! I knew you were a stud.
We can do 4 to 6 of them a day if we'd like, if necessary. I think Thursday I've got 4 arches of all-on-4 I'm doing. So one in the morning, one in the afternoon, a double. But what was the question again?
Well, what do you say the argument all-on-3 means? I mean, all-on-4 means none on 3.
The point is that usually that implant, the 4th implant, will be lost before you get them to their final. So remember, people are putting a temporary for 4 to 6 months while they're healing. And we can assess with an Ostel or just using the end of a mirror handle, tapping on that implant to see if it's integrated. And I can tell just by the sound of it if it's integrated or not.
What's it sound like if it's integrated? What's it sound like if it's not?
It sounds like a piece of driftwood floating in the lake if it's not integrated.
And you hear a ting.
And you hear a ting if it's...
which the Ping Golf Club was from Phoenix, too.
The Beryllium Golf Club, that's right.
Yeah, when you hit it, it's ping.
But I saw something really, really cool, and as of last night, I totally turned on to this, where this might be something I could use to completely help a totally different socioeconomic market. And that's that Locator just came out with this new attachment called an FTX. Have you seen that?
Mm-mm.
You've got to look that up after I go today.
FTX, Locator FTX?
Yeah, Locator FTX.
Made by who?
It's made by, is it Zest Anchors? I think that's the distributor.
Okay.
So here's the crazy thing about these FTXs is they're not patient removable. It's a fixed restoration. So it's a little peak ball and socket, kind of like your glenoid fossa. that it snaps into that little cup that mounts on top of the implant, but the patient can't take it out. And every 3 months or 4 months as the patient comes in for recall, you put these little bladders, kind of like an angioplastic balloon, and you use a syringe and you hydraulically crank this thing up and it elevates it up to 7 to 15 bars and pops that thing out, and then you can clean it up and put it back in. So
Damn.
that's going to eliminate the bars.
What's the website on that? You go
It's just a locator FTX. If you just type, and they had some videos on YouTube about it already, showing you how to take it in and out.
Zest Anchors.
I think that's going to be huge. But the reason why I say if one fails on the 1-on-3, what would be wrong with going in and putting one of those locator FTXs in a different location and using that as your attachment?
By the way, Townies, it's always nice when you go find a rockin' hot YouTube video. So on Dentaltown, on any post, when you hit reply, there's that little YouTube icon. So when you go to a YouTube video, there's the share, which is the code. Yeah. But if you hit embed, it's the code, and you cut and paste that embed, drop it in the YouTube icon, and then that video is there.
I'll go into my account later on today, and I'll make a promise to you I'm going to be a better Dentaltown forum after this, because I've kind of checked out of it for a while. I'll post it later today and do that share on that innovation that they're showing with this guy. Michael Scherer is a prosthodontist that's showing how it's working with that FTX.
He's in California, right?
He's in California. I just saw it last night. I was just,
He said the funniest thing on his LinkedIn comment one time. I liked one of his videos so much I posted it in Dentaltown, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. I mean, I pushed out. I mean, I have, then like 3 days later he goes, wow. He says, I hit the 100,000 club. I never thought I'd have a YouTube video that got 100,000 views. I so desperately ordered out of there. It's because I shared it on 6 platforms.
Yeah, but the all-on-3 question. We can use that FTX to retrofit an attachment underneath a failed one with the FTX. Add a new implant, put the FTX in there, attach it to the bar and the stuff that's already done, and you're back to 4. But Nobel just came out with their new, what do they call that? Trefoil. Essentially it's an all-on-3. They make a pre-made bar that fits on 3 implants that are put in parallel to each other, as long as they're symmetrical in the mouth, and they work.
That leads to a great argument, because when you sit down and you talk to a mechanical engineer, like in Australia, like the Americans put, like on an overdenture, 2 implants, an overdenture.
Hate doing those.
The Australians put 1 down the middle. And the, like all-on-3, one assembly system, a lot of the mechanical engineers say that's just a better idea.
Yeah. Well, and here's the other one. I used to hate doing locators, but I've started using this company in Anaheim called True Abutment. I found them at one of the lab meetings. I don't go to dental meetings much anymore. I go to all the lab meetings because I enjoy them more. I want to find out what the lab guy struggles with so I can be a better dentist and give him a better thing. But the True Abutment guys, you can have implants placed every which direction, all kinds of angles sticking out, angles that you couldn't restore.
It's called True what?
True Abutment. And they're custom abutments that are made with locators that are perfectly parallel. So you can take a case and take an implant level impression, ship it off to True Abutment, and then for $168, they'll send you a custom abutment with a locator on top of it, where you put them in the patient's mouth and the locators are exactly in the same perpendicular position. And now all of a sudden that makes a locator viable.
Now, are they owned by Glidewell?
No.
Because they're in Anaheim.
No, they're on Harbor, just north of Disneyland. Where Glidewell's down there in Newport Beach.
But I mean, in the same vicinity. I wonder if it's some old Glidewell employees.
The True Abutment guys, I think there's some Korean gentlemen I met that imported some CAD/CAM equipment from Korea. I could be wrong on that.
Interesting.
But that's a neat little thing that I discovered that's really helping for people that want to fix detachable. Where, locators, if you don't get those things.
YouTube video on their deal.
Yeah.
So if you want to share that with your townies, all you do is hit that, drop that in Dentaltown, see what everybody thinks about that.
But have you ever done locators and had them they struggle and the patient doesn't like them? It's because you want those things perfectly perpendicular to each other.
Well, my job is to try to predict what the homies are wanting to, in their car, thinking about what are they asking. And the first thing they're asking is, how are you getting all these patients? Are you also a marketing whiz kid?
Well, I spent a lot of money on marketing. I spent a lot of time on it. I've got a sister-in-law that's got a master's degree in mass communications, and she does all my marketing and my web copywriting for me. We pay quite a bit of money to. You ever wonder how Google makes their money? I can tell you why. We pay a lot of money to Google every month for
Google AdWords.
Google AdWords, search engine optimization, pay-per-click. I've told you everything I know at this point.
So
just
you're big
saying
into
the words.
Google AdWords.
Google AdWords, and but it's expensive.
And what percent are you buying Google AdWords versus Facebook?
I don't do any. Well, I spend maybe a couple $100 on Facebook every month.
Yeah, that's one thing I have to call baloney on some of these publicly traded companies like, say, Twitter or Snapchat. It's like, have you ever given Twitter $1?
No.
Have you ever given Snapchat $1?
No.
How are these...
Instagram, you don't give them any money.
How are these companies worth any money? When you talk to any marketing people, say, who
I don't
are you
understand
actually
it.
giving your Benjamins and grants to? And they say Google.
Google, I get. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
When you're writing big fat checks to Google and you've never given a penny to Twitter or Snapchat, why do you own their stock?
yeah, I agree. There's no real revenue stream for Facebook that I understand. Of course, I'm just a dentist, so
Yeah.
that doesn't make any sense either.
Well, it's tough talking to because you tend to gravitate to what you love. So if you're a millennial and you're 25 and you check your Facebook 15 times a day, when you open your practice, you want to do all these Facebook ads. But when you actually see people that have data, the old direct mail piece is still the biggest return on investment. They'll say, okay, yeah, you only get a 1% return, but if you mail to 100 old ladies in an old area and one lady comes in for a denture and
You
gets
made your money.
upgraded to an
Yeah.
all-on-4, cha-ching.
Well, my
so
mar-
just because you don't like something, that's your bias. You say,
Yeah.
well, when I go to the mail, I throw it all away and they're cutting down trees, and I get all that.
I've
But it's
learned to
still
just
direct mail
pay
works
the
best.
person the money. That's my sister-in-law that does it for me. She does a great job, and I step back and I listen to what she says because she can do analytics on Google.
So, dude, how do you work with your wife and your sister-in-law? Are you just like, are you on Xanax, Valium, or are you a complete alcoholic by now?
For fear that my wife and sister-in-law might listen to this podcast, I take the Fifth Amendment.
Oh my! My dad had 5 daughters, and I loved working with my dad. But my 5 sisters, after about a year, my dad, one by one, they all said, "You take this job and shove it." But
I do like working with my wife, and we are uniquely in a position where she likes to do everything I don't.
Nice.
She's an orthodontic genius, and she does all. She went through straight wire. She
okay, is she placing implants?
she doesn't like him. She doesn't want anything with the tool kit or a
But see, that's
screwdriver.
the point. You can't. Do you think you could do what you're doing and do what she's doing?
I couldn't do what she's doing. It'd drive me
you
crazy.
can't do everything, kids.
No.
You gotta. If you're gonna do something new, you're gonna have to give up something old. You can't be it's too damn complicated. I mean, you're just doing endo. You'd have to read that book. By the way, I have no connection to the book. I'm just plugging it because my buddy Brad's in it. But the bottom line is, you just can't.
You can't do everything.
You cannot do everything.
I think
you can't even do your own SEO anymore.
No.
just
No.
your own marketing and advertisement.
But be careful. This is what I'd tell people if I could give you any marketing advice. If you walk through a dental convention, there'll be 5 SEO companies there waiting for you. And they'll all promise you, I went through this. I can name names, but I'm not going to, of companies that I've contracted with previously. And they'll say, oh, yeah, we can get you on page 1. We can get your pay-per-click up, that sort of stuff. And they'll sign an annual contract, and you'll pay $1,200, $1,500 a month, and nothing will ever happen. It got me so frustrated. So finally, I'm kind of griping and bitching and moaning about it when we were on a vacation up to Lake Powell, and my sister-in-law overheard me what I was talking about, and she says, well, I can do all that for you. And so I gave her a crack at it, and that was 5 years ago, and I think we've tripled our business since then.
I want to talk about another very complicated part of what you're doing. That's the sedation. Are you doing your own sedation, or do you have an anesthesiologist?
I have my 1303 permit from the state of Arizona, which means I went through the docs, oral conscious sedation, which you want the best CE on the planet. Docs, those guys are great. I'm not much of a scientist or pharmacologist, but I really thoroughly enjoyed listening to Timothy Feck Feck and Mike Silverstein or Silverman.
I know, I've invited
those
Mike
guys
like
are
5 times to
fantastic.
come on the show.
I went twice just to absorb it, but really enjoyed that. But I had my IV sedation permit at one point in time, but I let it lapse, and then I got into all-on-4 and surgery. So now what I do, the 1303 permit allows me to contract with a nurse anesthetist or an anesthesiologist. So it makes me wildly productive to bring an anesthesiologist in, which we've got an anesthesiologist and 2 nurse anesthetists. They're not on staff, but these guys will come anytime I want. They love coming and working for us because being in dentistry is a happy time, and people wake up and they've got new teeth and they're smiling. They never get that after a colonoscopy. So these guys will come anytime they want. But my anesthesiologist will come. He does a real good medical assessment on the patient. I use that to tell the patient, I go, you know what, I'm having an anesthesiologist here in the room with us, and we've got all of our equipment. We're certified by the state. It's very safe. We've got all the crash cart drugs. But how nice would it be if you could just have somebody sedated and you can just go to town and work efficiently and not have them talk back to you?
It's just, I mean, how many deaths in our backyard have you seen in your 30 years?
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where, dude, I mean, why would you do that if you could have an anesthesiologist? And if you think it's hard to get an anesthesiologist, you must not have any kids, because I've taken 4 boys to the emergency room in the middle of the night, and once the OBGYN gets in there and says, you want epidural, he gets out his cell phone, and like 3 minutes later, some guy appears, and I say, where were you? And he's like, I was just sitting at the Waffle House drinking coffee, waiting.
That's right.
I'm on call.
Yeah.
I mean, they're on call all over the town, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
So I love working with an anesthesiologist because I can literally do a double arch on pretty much anybody at this point in time in about 2.5 hours, no more than.
And basically, if it's not 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, you can get like 12 of them to show up. They're like vampires out of nowhere. Like if you did just your case on Saturday, and Saturday they're all on call.
So we just use somebody to give our anesthesia services, and it works out great.
Yeah, and everybody's always talking about I think the easiest way to split this market in America is half are afraid of the dentist and half are afraid of the cost.
Well, people come in with bad teeth and need an all-on-4. It's probably because they were deathly scared of the dentist.
So if half of America is afraid of the dentist, I mean, then get on one of these anesthesiology call surfaces, and they can do really light sedation. They can do it in there.
And that's the great thing with an anesthesiologist is they watch what I do when I'm doing an all-on-4, and they know when I want the patient woke up so I can get the bite. So they'll cut off the propofol about 5-10 minutes right before they can see where I'm at, and the patient's awake, and we get the bite, and they're comfortable. And
do you use that just because you were a huge Michael Jackson fan?
I didn't even know what propofol was until Michael Jackson came around.
Isn't that bizarre that he was addicted to a drug that had no euphoria, just completely knocked you out?
He just wanted to sleep is probably all it was.
He just wanted to check out.
Yeah,
I mean, he wasn't even getting high.
Yeah.
He was just turning off the switch. That is so bizarre.
But you got to monitor them on propofol. You know, it's the respiratory depression when they're on other drugs.
So how many offices do you have?
We have an office in Payson right now and one in Scottsdale.
So a lot of people, let me throw that business model in bridge. A lot of people just say, Chris, all you're doing is you went from having 1 rent to 2 rents. Now you got 2 rents, equipment, build out, computer, insurance, malpractice, professional dues. Do you do that and just say, oh yeah, but that's just all a marketing cost?
We started in Payson because I had a really small mind, and I came from a small town, and I thought, I can do this in this small town because it's easy to market yourself. You know, everybody knows the new dentist moved into town. Scottsdale, Gilbert, which we actually lived down here when I started the Payson office first. It intimidated me. I couldn't, how do you ever get established in a big metropolitan area? So we opened in 1998 in Payson. I did my demographics. There was 5 dentists serving 35,000 people up there. You couldn't get an appointment for a toothache for 3 months in Payson. So we just started and opened up. And, we were doing $100,000, charging $550 for a crown.
You hear this?
In 1990.
This is a story from LA and Cleveland and Chicago and Houston. Yeah. Everyone crushing it. Day one went rural. End of story.
Rural, yeah.
End of story.
Yeah, because there's a need for them, and people.
Supply and demand. You created a supply where everyone was standing in line demanding it.
Well, then, Patrice, she's a city girl, and I've turned into city boy. Where
was she born and raised?
Houston.
So she's big city girl.
Yeah. So we opened an office just because it's better we can be in business together, but do we have to work together all day long? I would drive her crazy. She'd drive me crazy. So we had those 2 offices, and we started that in 2000. And that took, and I'll say, the metropolitan practice in Scottsdale, it took about 7 or 8 years for us to really get it going. The pacing office carried us that many years.
There's a dentist on every corner in Scottsdale.
Well, and it's. I think somebody said in one of your podcasts, maybe it was the Pacific Dental guy, that Scottsdale is the most competitive dental market in the United States.
Yeah, it's on every corner. Because the kids come out of school and they think,
yeah,
well, if that's where all the rich people live,
vacation town,
I'm going to go there because they all have money. Well, first of all, rich people have money because only a fool and their money are soon parted.
Well, and here's the crazy thing.
And number 2, an acre in Scottsdale has like 1 house.
Yeah.
Whereas an acre in Ahwatukee might be an apartment complex that has 98 people per acre on it.
Yep.
So there's no density, and rich people don't part with their money.
But now the office in Scottsdale far outtook my pacing office, and but it's predominantly because I'm, these cases that come in for my implant services are usually high dollar type cases, and we've got good Google reviews, and we know what we're doing, and I've got long-term staff that's been with me that knows every move that I make and could probably work in my place if I call in sick and do the cases. So the key is my team. And
what I love most about Jan, I've had my same assistant for 30 years, and sometimes she'll hand me an instrument, and I'll look at it, and I hand it back, and then she takes it, and she hits me with it. And whenever she hits me with it, I have to stop and think, okay, Jan knows I need this instrument. Why can my monkey brain not know that I need this instrument? Then it finally dawns on me. I'm like, you're right.
Her brain's not as old as yours.
Actually, we're the same age. But I'm probably thinking about something else, and she's keeping me focused.
But we're real fortunate now, and the office is doing well, and I'm probably going to hire an associate and kind of run them through a 6-month follow me around, and I want you to learn how I talk with people, and I want you to learn how I move, and the jokes that I tell, the stupid dental jokes that I tell over and over and over, but the patients never heard them. Right. Like you take a big tray full of Emperor gum and you hold it in front of a patient's mouth right before you put it in the mouth, and you say, do you like grape? And they go, yeah. And then you put it in the mouth and you say, it ain't grape. Stupid stuff like that. But I want the continuity to be the same, and so I'm going to get an associate because.
And the other thing I also learned in the team is that when we have 8 chairs around a central sterilization deal, but you can hear the hygiene talk. But when you keep refining your explanation and you keep trying to make it more succinct and concise, that you find out that you leave the room and then your assistant is saying exactly like that. Your hygienist saying, and then you're sitting there working one day and you're hearing the assistant explain why they need root plane cure, and the whole office gets, I saw this video deal on these 4 comedians sitting around. It was the 4 biggest comedians like Chris Rock and Seinfeld and all this. And Seinfeld said he'll write a joke on Monday, and then Tuesday he'll just try to take like 1 word out of that joke just to make it tight,
just to get it better,
succinct. And he says sometimes he'll work a week on a joke, and every day's goal is just, can I say this with 1 word less? And then you go listen to dentists and they're explaining something, and they're just talking for 40 days and 40 nights. The person's on their Facebook, the assistant's asleep, just boom, boom, boom. I want to tell you another business model I've noticed. We've been in this game for 3 decades. I've seen so many people with your surgical skills go pick up the cheapest denture universe in the wrong part of town, and then go in there with their skills, and all these people are coming in for these $295 full mouth dentures, and they cynics say, well, that's bait and switch. No, it's good business. They come in, all the marketing is a full mouth upper and lower denture.
Huge need for it.
$295. But then when they get there, you say, but we've got this nicer one with Ivoclar Bluetooth, and it's $495. Or we could put 2 implants and snap overdenture on for $49.95. Or we can and then upgrade. So you go all the way from a $250 an arch denture to a $20,000 all-in-4. I know guys who bought these 50-year-old denture deals and took it from doing like $275,000 a year to $4 to $8 million a year.
That's right.
I mean, a 50-year-old brand name where everybody in Tampa knows, oh yeah, Denture World, cheapest denture, and everybody in a trailer park knows it. But then when they go there, they realize, well, I do have a $30,000 car. and I do eat 6 times a day, I think I would like to spend my car on my mouth. What do you think of that business model?
I watch it like a hawk.
And some of them are the rural. They'll even go get a big old billboard on the side of the road. And you notice when they get the billboard, they don't talk about any of their implants, overdentures.
No.
It's just a full mouth denture, $4.95 or $2.95.
Well, most of the people that come to me for my consults now, the consult's 5 minutes. They've already researched it on the internet. They know what it is.
And there's another deal. Take about the oldest corporate dental chain is actually what is it? American Denture Center.
Denture Centers of America.
Denture Centers of America that's the oldest one. I think it's a 100-year-old corporate chain. It's just amazing. They realize that the sweet spot in marketing is actually the extraction price. So they advertise the lowest extraction price because who's going to come in and get one extraction? You're going to come in and get one extraction. You're going to get 20 extractions. You're going to get a full mouth denture, all this. And this guy I know who picked up on that in Florida told me that for years the only ad he runs is the $79 extraction, period. Just this little black ad, just extraction, $79. He said he's never had a patient. I mean, if you need an extraction, I mean, come on. If your mouth needs an extraction, do you think anything else is going on in that mouth?
There's probably a lot of things to do there.
Oh my God! Well, I've never seen a patient who needs an extraction where, oh well, everything else is fine. I mean, that's the sign of that's like a little piece of ice sticking out on an iceberg. I mean, when you need an extraction, holy moly!
But I agree. I mean, I think those places really have a place in our market, and just depends on what business model you want to follow. I've watched guys that they get out of school and they want to chase the cosmetic market, and they want to be the veneer guy, or be known for the high end. I've watched other classmates or fellow colleagues go out and they go into the denture market or the extraction market, and all in all, I think they're both doing a great service. Probably the denture guy doing a better service than what the veneer, because he's accommodating a need. You talked about that Waffle House lady in your MBA thing. I always thought that's the kind of patient that I like to work with. That really means a lot to me to help those kind of people out that, are the working class, because that's where I came from. I'm not a...
So you were born on the wrong side of the tracks.
I was, there was a plumbing shop next door to my house, a lumber yard on the other side, and a masonry yard behind us. So,
and those were where the best companies, like Walmart came from. Little old
thing, yeah.
Bentonville, Arkansas. I mean, his desk was a door over 2 saw benches when he had $1 billion in cash.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Well, that's he says, I'm keeping the image of low cost.
The house that I grew up in was my dad's grocery store, the front of the house, the bunkhouse in the middle where we slept and ate our meals and watched TV, and then my mom's beauty shop was in the back, and they shared a parking lot. You wouldn't be able to get a place like that zoned in Phoenix or anywhere anymore.
And by the time Walmart was in 30 states, all those founders all were multimillionaires and this and that. And Sam still made them, when they traveled, sleep 2 to a room in a Motel 6. And they'd like, dude, I got $20 million in cash. He's like, I don't care. If you're going to part with our core values, leave.
Yeah.
I mean, he just kept them to their core values. One last thing. You promised me an hour. An hour for you is enough production. I can't believe you came over here and did this show. I'm so honored. But last question. Do you see these all-in-4s and all these implants? Do you see yourself as a dentist doing oral health? Or is this mostly females getting their teeth done for their mental health? I mean, do you think this is more you're serving form and function and chewing and mastication? Or do you see the typical patient giving you a bunch of money to look younger, sexier, more mental health? Are you a mental health doc or a dental health doc?
I'm a mental health doc, and you're a little bit off on how you describe it. When you go to my website, I want you to look at that little redhead 23-year-old girl that came in that had bad teeth, and nobody could help her. And here's a case where...
And your website is MyArizonaSmile.
MyArizonaSmile.com.
MyArizonaSmile.com. And it's a beautiful website.
So the story with this girl, very succinctly, she came in, she's a single mom, cute little redhead, awful teeth, missing most of her adult teeth, yeah. And I I did the consult for her, and then after she left, I said to my office manager, I go, tell me the story there. And she goes, well, she didn't qualify for anything and wasn't going to, she really wants to get it done, of course, but can't do it. She just wanted to consult more or less. And so I waited about 45 minutes, and I went back to my office manager and said, call that girl back and tell her she won the contest. And Amy said, what contest? What are you talking about? And I said, you know, I just made up a contest, and that girl just won it. And I go, here's the deal. I want to get her story, because this girl wouldn't even show you her face when we were doing the consult. She had her eyes down. She was completely emotionally messed up her whole life from these teeth that were just a disaster. So we called her up and I said, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to get Nobel donated the implants, laboratory donated the dentures. I donated my time. And we had a videographer come in and tape her and just talk to her before she started. We taped a little bit of the surgery, just the clean stuff, nothing of blood or anything. So it was candy coated for public consumption. And we taped her afterwards. And if you see the transformation in the countenance of this girl, and it gave her a life. And I get emotional talking about it, because it's paid dividends for me hundreds and hundreds of times.
You're verklempt now on it.
I'm a little bit verklempt right now, but it's one of those things that's really kind of why I became a dentist. And that's what I saw in the people that inspired me to become a dentist, is that I want to be somebody that gives people a lease on life and a leg up and a future that they couldn't have before. And that can be a 23-year-old girl. It can be an 80-year-old guy that still wants to eat steak and drive an Eldorado. So,
well, I'm not going to, that was the best close of any podcast I've heard. I'm not going to ruin that by opening my mouth. That video has 67,000 views.
Yeah.
Can we plug it in on the end of this podcast so where it stops now?
Sure.
If they're watching this on YouTube or Dentaltown or Google, they can see the video. And if they're on iTunes, they can at least hear it.
But we're getting ready to do another one. I found another patient that what we're perfecting now is that you can literally walk into the office, as long as you haven't had any food the night before. We can have this anesthesiologist on deck. I can do the surgery. I can scan the mouth and make the teeth with that in-lab machine, having never seen you before, and have you walk out at 4 o'clock that day. We've already done the proof of concept.
Well, dude, if you got a videographer and all that stuff, I wish you'd make an online CE course for Dentaltown.
What we did, it's coming up on May 3rd, but it's kind of like the Coen brothers videography with it. So I've been talking to Howard Goldstein, and I worked with Devin. You've been pestering me about it for 3 or 4 years, so it's coming online May 3rd. It's already done.
Nice.
But I'm going to probably add and put, updates to it and stuff as time goes by. But
just make another one.
Make another one. So, yeah, it's coming online May 3rd, so we've already
By
done it.
the way, I'm Howard at Dentaltown, but if you want to make online CE course, we have two Howards. We have Howard Goldstein, so he's Hogo, Hogo at Dentaltown.com. I'm Howard at Dentaltown.com, but these... I don't think I've ever had an original idea in my life. The reason I started that online CE in 2004 is because we're here at University of Phoenix. I remember going to the airport and seeing the University of Phoenix. And then the next time, it seemed like I went to the airport, there was like another building and another building. It's the whole corridor. So I had to stare at that thing expanding for like 5 years before my monkey brain thought, you know what, we ought to do online CE. And it's just huge because they...
You're in a market where I think it's going to do nothing but it's going to explode, the online stuff right now.
But you know what makes me most romantic about our online CE? Is I throw my own homies under a bridge. We just charge like $18 a course for in the rich 20 countries. But when you go to Africa, Asia, and Latin America, there's so many dental schools. We don't charge them a dime for that. We don't charge dental students in America, in rich countries. But I've walked in dental schools, they just bust out bawling because their dental books are all 20 years old. Oftentimes written in a different language.
That's great.
Donated from France, and no one here speaks French, or the Chinese are always donating them.
You just motivated me to start contributing more into it, so that could be a worldwide contribution.
I mean, it's amazing where instead of textbooks, they'll have like this little girl named Iwa, and her job all night long is that the instructors pick the threads and they print them all out for all the handouts of the students the next day or whatever. But there's 2 million dentists on earth, and what's happening with the internet is 500,000 dentists are transferring all their knowledge to the other 1.5 million, and the level of competence in agriculture and dentistry is skyrocketing, because in 1880, 80% of the planet couldn't read or write, and now in 2017, 80% of the planet lives in a home where someone has a smartphone. And if they just went to Wikipedia, they'd have 52 million. My first encyclopedia is, I was born in 62. In 72, my mom went to a garage sale.
Britannica.
And bought Britannica. Yeah. That was printed in 52.
That's right, yeah.
So when I was 10, my encyclopedias were 20 years old.
And you were the kid that opened up American Heritage, National Geographic, and Encyclopedia Britannica as a kid, because there wasn't anything but 3 TV shows to watch, and so you read those things like crazy, didn't you? That's what I did. And the reason
I hated democracy and don't believe in it is because I had 5 sisters, so I'd vote for football, and then 5 of them would vote for some musical, the Oklahoma or whatever. And I can remember as little kid
The Sound of Music.
This democracy thing is not working out well. It's I don't believe in it at all. But man, thanks for all you do. But yeah, you homies that are out there posting, you just don't realize that you're. I mean, I've been in Somalia, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and these people just live on Dentaltown. And they'll tell you that their dental schools they think are way behind. They come out of those dental schools, they say, I didn't hear any of this stuff, and they're on it all day long. And it's just so cool.
That's neat.
And the economists did a big deal in agriculture. Like Africa's agriculture output's like doubling like every 4 years, because these kids are barefoot and they're looking at satellite pictures of their land and then reading on Wikipedia that they need to plant clover over here and they're overwatering here and put more water here. And they're increasing their crop yields from a Samsung phone. I mean, how cool is it to have no shoes and be watching your farm via satellite?
That's crazy. Well, did you see that movie Lion? Did you go see that movie Lion? About the kid that got abandoned at the train station in India?
No, I
little
didn't.
5-year-old kid. That was it was up for Academy Award this year. But this little kid in India got lost, abandoned, orphaned on the streets of Calcutta, India. Got abused, taken advantage of, and stuff like that. 2-3 years later, he gets adopted by a family in Hobart, Tasmania. And they raise him up until he's like 25, send him to college, have the nice Western upbringing and stuff. So he's in college, drinking the booze and sitting around talking to all his friends. And they say, well, tell us your story. He goes, well, I got adopted when I was 5 and, lived in Tasmania since. And they go, well, what about your story before then? And he goes, I really don't remember much of it. I got little faint memories of it and things like that. But he says, I got lost in the train station and got adopted over here. And they said, well, what do you remember? And he essentially took Google Earth, and it took him 3 years to go in and find the place, because he could remember the train station had a tower, a water tower next to it. So he Google Earthed and found a train station 1,200-mile radius away from Calcutta. He did all these calculations to figure out how far away it was. And he found his mother just because of Google Earth. And it's a true story. They made a movie out of it.
I saw the review of that on the airplane where it come back.
Yeah, you got to see that. That was a great movie.
Well, dude, thanks for all that you do for dentistry, your patients, and thank you so much for coming over and talking to my homies.
Thank you.
All right, buddy. Have a rockin' hot day.